It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham. Now, something is brewing in Detroit's culture scene, and it's growing every single day. New to mid-career to established artists are helping reimagine Detroit through creative and innovative ways. During Detroit Month of Design, nearly 95 events have activated different spaces around the city, including the highly anticipated Eastern Market After Dark. And as the month winds down, there are a few more events you can attend and learn more about the people championing the city through creative endeavors and economic empowerment. Season Fair is a new contemporary art fair debuting at Michigan Central this month as part of Detroit Month of Design. Financially supported by the Gilbert Family Foundation, the fair will gather 11 leading galleries from across North America and 10 Detroit-based artists that will be featured alongside special projects, artist talks, and civic engagement. Joining us now is Akua Hill, Director of Arts and Culture at the Gilbert Family Foundation, and Amani Olu, founder and curator of Season Fair. Thank you both so much for joining us on the Metro today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So Amani, jumping in with you, Detroit is known for its creative exports. If you know where to look, you know where to find the stuff. So Olu and Company is one of your businesses. It's a marketing and business consulting company for folks in the arts specifically. So doing the work that you do, you know, having your fingers within the arts and culture scene in the way that you do, why Season Fair?
I just wanted to create an opportunity for a contemporary international art market to thrive in Detroit. I think that you're seeing a lot of consolidation in the global art fair space, and you're seeing galleries have trouble, you know, participating in these fairs because they're very expensive. And then I was thinking about artists and how can you take a contemporary gallery market situation or create a commercial exhibition alongside Detroit-based artists. So I wanted to create that dynamic where you could come to Detroit, invest in the city by participating as an exhibitor, but then bringing in some of the leading artists in the city so that you're having that conversation, which is both global and local.
And just curating and getting, you know, having conversations with folks across the country and honestly across the continent, but just really understanding what's happening. Where do you see Detroit compared to what's happening across the country in terms of art and art gallery spaces?
I think that Detroit is still emerging in terms of contemporary art, in terms of commercial exhibitions. I think that when I started the fair, I was like, we have great artists here who have amazing studio practices. We have great foundations that support artists. We have great exhibition spaces, and there's just like a really amazing community here. But the piece for me where I felt like I could add value was around the commercial side, right? I wanted to create a marketplace for galleries to be able to sell art in Detroit because I believe that there are a lot of collectors here, both at the private level, at the institutional level, at the corporate level, and they have to go to Chicago, New York, LA, Miami, Dallas, all these other cities to buy art, or they're buying through an advisor, or if they're sort of in the mix, they sort of know how to do things via auction and online. But I just felt like if Dallas and Houston and the Berkshires has an art fair, we need an art fair in Detroit. But it can't exist on its own. It can't just be, oh, here are 30 galleries from across the world, and there's no participation from Detroit-based artists. So that's where Detroit Presents came in, and with the help of, you know, Gilbert Family Foundation, we were able to make that happen. So again, I talk about it as you have this, you know, marketplace for buying and selling art, but then you have this exhibition side where you can still buy the work of Detroit-based artists. And then we have talks and other programming,
which we are definitely going to get into because I really do want to talk to you about the economic power within the arts community here in the city of Detroit, and you're like hitting right on it. So we'll kind of come back to that conversation. But I do want to bring Akua into the conversation as well from the Gilbert Family Foundation. Now, the Gilbert Family Foundation is putting a lot of money and attention to arts and culture in Detroit. I know that there is a 10-year plan from the Gilbert Family Foundation. So talk a little bit about that plan and why you guys are putting money into the arts and culture scene here in Detroit.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I just want to say, as much as I love arts and culture, our plan is very multidimensional in nature. And really, it's rooted in supporting the well-being of Detroiters, making sure that they have the resources that they need in order to really cultivate thriving livelihoods and neighborhoods in the city. And so when we created this plan, we took a look at what are all of the aspects of vital community and resident life here in the city that make a difference. And arts and culture, for me, I'm very glad to see that that was included in the plan, because I know how important that is in the lives of many, many folks across the world, especially in a place like Detroit, which has such a rich cultural heritage. That's not new, right? That's not just emerging today. That's been the case for generations. And so when you have a foundation like us and we think about the role that philanthropy plays, how can we create infrastructure and platforms for those creatives that are based here to not only be able to scale their craft, but also to be able to support their well-being, because they're also residents of our city.
And that's a thing that I've been hearing a lot, or I hear a lot oftentimes with foundation, but just with the artists in general. They love what they do, they love the industry that they're in, but the money, they need more. They need more resources. So, what role does Gilbert Family Foundation see itself in Detroit's arts and culture scene with so many talented people, like you said? How hard is it for you and your team to narrow down who and what gets supported?
Yeah. It's a great question, because to your point, right, we can look at individuals, and I personally have lots of friends that are in the arts community, right? I want to see them thrive. I want to see them to have everything they need to have whole lives, not just as professionals, but as human beings, right? At the same time, it is our job to take a look at the larger infrastructure needs at a system level, because yes, we may give out and please hear me when I say direct grants to artists is important, right? Also, if we're only supporting individuals, right, we're rarely going to get at the really larger systematic barriers that artists face in order for our ecosystem to really raise in the way that we would like to see it. So when we're thinking about strategic investments, it's both about how do we make sure creatives are supported, but how do we also make sure the opportunities and infrastructure is in place to support the ecosystem as a whole.
Thank you for that response, because my follow-up to that is the infrastructure and the ecosystem itself. Just like we were hearing from Amani, we're in almost the infancy, emerging stage in terms of the arts and culture scene here, especially when we talk about just the foundations that are already here in place that could use that support. Could you talk about some of those places or some of the systems that you all have been able to support through grants or the programming or just the 10-year plan to make sure that arts and culture and the city of Detroit and its people are taken care of?
Yeah, so I would say we have a few strategic pillars, right? One that we're really excited about exploring more. And I just want to say, I think in the landscape of arts and culture, we should always be in a position of learning. Like, the nature of the work is that it is evolving constantly, and artists often are pushing us to expand the way we think about the conditions that we're all experiencing on a daily basis. So when we look at, those kind of like systematic foundational elements, having art fairs where creatives can, have a platform to share their work on a global market, that's one piece of it. Another piece is looking at the full career pipeline and saying, like, how does an artist even get to a point to be considered for an art fair like Season Fair? And so it takes us going back and back and back and say, where's the origin, right? The young person that's in a DPSCD school today, right, who may aspire to be able to have a vital creative career, and also we hope wants to have that career here in Detroit, what do they need to get to that point, right? And there's so many, yes, there's the craft itself, but there's the business side of it, to Amani's point. There's also things about, like, how do you cultivate relationships with galleries, with museums? How do you create a portfolio? And so we're looking at that holistically and saying, like, where are the gaps and how can we look at supporting opportunities for more folks rather than just the individual creatives.
And can I just jump in on that point? When I say emerging in terms of the Detroit's art community, I'm not speaking specifically of like artistic practices. I think that when I moved here 10 years ago, it felt very much like artists were here, they were making work, they were doing their thing, there were galleries and things were moving, right? It was happening. But then you start to see these artists evolve and then they get to a point where they sort of hit a roadblock. So when I talk about adding value and the infrastructure that Akua was talking about, Season Fair is attempting to address that and say, okay, we're going to create something that people in the larger art market understand. They understand fairs and what they mean. So they'll come here and they'll become exposed to these artists. And then what you'll find is that artists start getting represented by different galleries throughout the world. And that is really, you know, there's a lot of goals, but that's part of the goal, is to bring the market to Detroit as opposed to exporting talent to other parts of, you know, the country or the world.
Yeah, see what we have going on. Come see us, come visit us and see what we have going on here.
And another quick point, because this is important. I was looking at Chicago's exhibition weekend, right? There are 50 galleries participating in Chicago exhibition weekend, right? In this city, again, in terms of contemporary art, I'm not talking, there's a lot of different galleries and spaces here, but in terms of contemporary art, we probably have a handful.
Yeah. And there's 50 there
and there's
in Chicago
50,
for the week.
and that's just the ones that are participating.
Yeah.
So when I say emerging, there's a lot we can do, and as a marketing professional, that is my thing. It's like I bring attention to things.
Exactly. No, exactly. Because we're going to get into that. And we're talking about Season Fair, an inaugural contemporary art fair that's happening this week at Michigan Central. And we're also learning a little bit more about why the Gilbert Family Foundation is investing heavily in the arts in Detroit. My guests are Akua Hill, Director of Arts and Culture at Gilbert Family Foundation, and Amani Olu, founder and curator, Director of Season Fair. I'm going to get that right. Amani, bringing you back into this conversation and really bringing you into the fold. Do you think Detroit is ready for a Season Fair? Do you think there will be enough local enthusiasm for something highlighting the fine arts world here that usually lives in larger cities like Chicago and New York, like you just said?
I think in my heart, yes, and like throughout my entire body, I'm like, this is our time, this is our moment. But we won't know for 3 years. Okay. It's going to be 3 editions before we really see the potential of Season. We are in our infancy stage right now, and you're talking about early adopters. It's kind of like a startup, right? There are people who are going to show up and support and understand what we're trying to do, and there are going to be people who are curious and they're not really sure. They don't know what an art fair is. They've never been to one. And then there are going to be folks who are just watching and paying attention on social, and then they'll come next year, and then it'll grow from there.
And who is this particular art fair for? Because I think about this for different levels of folks and where people are coming into art, especially, for example, someone like myself who loves art, loves everything about what's happening in the city of Detroit, but I haven't bought anything yet. So who are we trying to, talk to here?
I love this question.
Well, we hope you're coming, number one.
Yes.
So you have the experienced collector. They know what to do. They're comfortable talking to dealers, walking into galleries. That's just the world they live in. And then you have emerging collectors who maybe are not necessarily collecting, a lot of artwork, but they have a small collection and they're growing it. Then you have those who are what I say are still in their like Ferrari Birkin bag era, right? Where they're spending a lot of money on things. They're high net worth individuals, but they're not necessarily comfortable. They don't have access to a fair, and they don't see themselves as going to another city to buy art. That's just not their thing, right? But they're all here. And then you have the overall just like people who are interested and curious about art. They want to see it. They're not necessarily there to buy. They don't see themselves as collectors. And I want to make sure that we drive the point home that this should also just be an interesting cultural experience for people. I'm self-taught. Right? I didn't go to school for any of this stuff that I'm talking about, right? I learned a lot about art from going to art fairs because you have hundreds of exhibitors showing hundreds of artists. You pay what, $40, $50? I mean, I was VIP, so I never paid, but like you go to the fair and it's just like 100 years worth of art that you can see these pieces that ordinarily you're reading about in a book or a magazine, but now you can see them. And I think that it's going to be a transformative experience for people who've never done anything like this. And then maybe one day they'll buy a small print for $250 and now they're a collector.
That is the goal one day for myself as well. Akua, bringing you back into the conversation, like you were saying, it's important to make sure that we're filling in those gaps and making sure that people understand that the money and the resources are here, but they are supported throughout their entire career. And when we think about Detroit and the idea of the starving artist, quote unquote, you all often help cover the cost of commissioned to pay for artists who are commissioned. Talk about the economic power in Detroit's arts and culture community and how you all are trying to help build that.
I love this question so much because I think across the country, we're seeing a lot of cities, some that are further along than others, that are really exploring the power of arts and culture as a driver of community and economic development, right? A lot of folks do look at arts and culture still as like a nice to have, or a luxury. And it is very nice to have, right? And that's important as well. So we don't want to like undermine that. At the same time, arts and culture, and there is increasing evidence and studies that show that arts and culture can really impact the arts economy in a city in a way that drives the entire city's economic engine. And so I would say in Detroit, we are really trying to champion what this looks like. Obviously, we want to continue to be driving our investments with data, but also it's evident to see just with your own eyes, right? When you look at communities that have had the investment in, a cultural hub, right? There's connectivity that's fostered by that. People feel a sense of belonging, and it also draws people to those neighborhoods because guess what? It's a vital part of everyone's experience in life. And so, when we think about the arts economy here in Detroit, and when we think about where are some of those gaps, our investments are really to remove barriers for artists to be able to grow and scale their work, because we know that if they are doing well, if they are able to sustain careers here in the city and we're able to retain them, right? They don't think that they need to go to an LA, to a Chicago, to a New York in order to be able to just live and take care of their well-being, then that means that we're keeping folks here that will then make other folks want to say, oh, let's go, like you said, right? Let me go see what Detroit is talking about, And I think folks are already, every time somebody comes to Detroit who's never been here before and they get exposed to our arts and culture scene, like they leave and they're like, wow, I get it. It's really something you have to feel. So we want to make sure that we're supporting folks to be able to create that magic and that brilliance that makes folks want to continue to come here and appreciate our incredible city,
It is. And just as you were speaking about it, and I'm thinking about an economic driver. At one point, Motown was a huge economic driver. It's a culture, it's an arts, and it was such a huge economic driver for the city of Detroit.
And a business,
right? Business. So you think about what arts what it can do for an industry, and that is, that was one of them. Is a huge example that we have that we can pull from here in the city of Detroit.
Absolutely.
But Amani, bringing you back in before we get down to the end of the conversation, you're in marketing and you are specifically within the arts and culture scene within marketing. And I think about the city of Detroit and how awesome some of the folks are that are producing and creating right now and innovating right now. How do we get them past Detroit's audience? How do we get them past and market them outside of Detroit? We're so humble here sometimes where we don't want to talk and brag about ourselves.
That is very true.
But so how do we get it out of Detroit?
Well, you have to hire Olu and Company. That's the first step. I'll give you a little bit of a case study. When I first moved here, I didn't have any clients. I didn't really know anyone, and I was just sort of moving around, going to different galleries, and I started working with Library Street Collective.
Yeah.
And, I thought that they had a great program. JJ, Anthony were doing interesting stuff. And I was trying to figure out, how do we get journalists to write about Detroit-based exhibitions? And we just did a press trip. So they were doing a project with MoCAD, and I think it was like a fundraiser at their home. And I was like, let's get some journalists to come out here. We flew out 10 journalists. They wrote a bunch of stories about MoCAD, about Library Street Collective, about the general art scene here. And that was really the opportunity for me. And I was like, wait, we should have an art week here. So we did Detroit Art Week, and Detroit Art Week is really the foundation of season. So I think, and I always say this to all of my clients here, if you want to get national press coverage, you have to do two things. invest in having journalists come here, host them for 3 days, or we have to go to New York and sit down and meet with journalists. And we did that successfully with Library Street Collective, just to give you an example of a contemporary art gallery. But we've done that with dozens of clients here. That's a huge part of our playbook. But you have to have the resources and the time to commit to that. We did something very similar for many years with Design Corps, with Month of Design. A lot of the national press coverage, came from my shop.
That's amazing to think about. Akua?
If I could, brag on Amani real quick. One thing that I think is really incredible about Season Fair and the way that he's imagined it, and we've had lots of conversation about this, is that it's not just an art fair, but there's actually a series of talks that are actually accompanying it. And I think this is really important because the platform itself, like a lot of these artists are so talented, so brilliant, that their work speaks for itself, right? And so that's going to do what it needs to do. The other side of it, though, is shifting people's mindsets, right? That's going to happen through conversation. And so I love that he's bringing together both of these pieces in this fair, right? Come see the art, yes, but also come to the season talks, because that's where we're really getting into the depths of what the art world means at this moment in our history, what it means for communities, what does access look like, who is the art world for, shameless plug. That's one of the panels that I'm going to be on this weekend. But I think having the conversations to help root what we're seeing on the walls and kind of in the space is going to really be a game changer for how we're thinking about art fairs. So.
And we're at the end of the conversation, but, before I let you go, I would love to get a quick little last plug for Season Fair and, the importance of having something for folks to go to like this, especially at Michigan Central.
So this is an international art fair, but Detroiters need to feel proud that it's here. They need to feel ownership of it. Otherwise, it's not a success.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I hope all y'all listening come out, come support your hometown artists. You know what I mean? Because we've got 10 of them featured in Detroit Presents. Really excited to hype them up and come participate in the talks. And like Amani said, we got 3 years ahead, right? We got to see what this impact looks like, not just in this moment, but how it reverberates into the future. So I'm really excited.
Akua Hill is Director of Arts and Culture at Gilbert Family Foundation, and Amani Olu is the founder and curator of Season Fair. The Contemporary Art Fair will run from September 25th to September 28th at Michigan Central. To find out more, they should go to
season-fair.com.
Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Coming up, political satire has always been in the DNA of comedy here in the United States, but the Trump administration has been clamping down on late-night TV hosts with a pressure campaign on TV networks. Samantha Bee, who was once a correspondent for The Daily Show, is coming to Detroit this week for her own comedy show. Her conversation with Ryan Patrick Cooper is coming up next. You all stay right there. This is The Metro.